Hey folks, welcome back. Today I'm going to chat about how I scored 262 on step 1 and I ended up getting a 250 on step 2. I'll make a video on why I choked on step 2. I choked on test day, but I'll tell you guys how I studied. And, I'll just be honest, I learned to study from YouTube. There's a few videos that I'll tell you to watch, and these people, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. How to study and score highly on standardized exams is well elucidated. It's something that's known. The problem is everyone has their own study style, and everyone's wasting time on these passive learning techniques like Anki and note-taking and reading. And you're just wasting your life basically on this stuff. It's not helping. There's another problem with all this knowledge is that now that everyone knows it, the bar is so much higher now. For you to score 90th percentile today is a lot harder than for you to have scored a 90th percentile in 2010 or in 2000, because the tools are just so expansive. But let me just tell you how I studied. So I learned from YouTube. There's a YouTube video by Dan the Man MD. It was first titled My Path to 272. Now it's titled Step 1, Our Advice. This is Dan the Man and another guy named AJ. One of them matched neurology. The other one's an orthopedic surgeon. One got 272. The other one got a 268. And they just talked about, and they presented, like their evidence of their anecdotes, their scores through their scores as they progressed with practice tests. They basically talked about and explained in detail. It's all about high volume practice questions. I think Dan said he did like 14,000. AJ did like 12,000 or something like that. So right away you should go watch that video, and then you can come back here and I can give you more explanation. But basically the key is high volume, high quality practice. Okay? And this is not something that just applies to USMLE. You can watch Cali Muscle talk about 500 reps. You can watch the late and revered Rich Piana talking about arm day, 500-600 reps, 8-hour workouts. Anyone who's going to get good at something, you have to put in the reps. The problem is you were taught in undergrad and early on in med school that you should read the chapter and go over the PowerPoint and take notes and memorize concepts or words in Anki and watch Sketchy so you can do well. I think almost all of that stuff's a waste of time. It has a role only after you've already started high volume, robust, high quality practice. So let me explain what I did. First, I started with low-tier question banks. They were like $80 or something. The first one was pass test. This was like 8 to 9 months before I actually took step 1. Did that, just blasted through it, fresh, like not knowing much. I was getting questions wrong probably 80% of the time. Learning, reading the explanations. That's when I actually started learning how to take tests. Like, you think you know how to take tests because you did well in undergrad. Undergrad's a lot easier than med school. It's a lot easier than step 1. On step 1, there's no like first order questions. There's barely any second order questions. It's all third order stuff where you have to think and you have to think and you have to think if you want to score highly. And then I did USMLE RX. I just blasted through that again. These USMLE RX questions, they're so easy. You should have no reason not to do them. There's no limit too. So you should just set them up for you could basically set up a practice block, like 120 questions. You should be able to get through it in like 2 hours or 2.5 hours. You don't even need the full 3 hours. You should be blasting through these early on, okay? Because you're at the point where you're just learning how to test take. You're learning how to time yourself, build your confidence, to pick an answer, to not stall, to not be wishy-washy, to be decisive, to go with the best choice possible, to use process of elimination. You think you have that experience in the MCAT. The MCAT, I mean, honestly, my first test in med school, I felt like it was like the MCAT. And then we had a test every 3 weeks. So you just got to get used to this high volume thing. You got to make it like it's nothing. You got to wake up in the morning, do 4 blocks back to back like it's nothing. And and I'll talk about that more. So let's talk about what does it mean to have high volume, high quality practice. Okay. This means you're doing a timed block. Okay. It's random. You can't be cheating yourself and working on your weakness, your strengths only. You have to be reinforcing your strengths and working on your weaknesses, and you have to be paying attention, and you have to be not in between, not in between classes, not in between 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, not at a family gathering, not on your phone, none of that stuff. You gotta sit and isolate and quarantine yourself during the block. And you gotta take it like it's a real test. And I always start early in the morning, but that's okay if you can't start early in the morning, but you can't be cheating yourself. So why does high volume, high quality practice actually make a difference? Okay. So here's the biggest part. It's active learning. There is no Anki, let me just recall 1 or 2 words in a freaking sentence, respiratory syncytial, and the freaking word that's hidden was virus. Like, come on, like, what is that stuff? Okay. It forces you to recall with accountability. What does that mean? It forces you to recall, and if you're not really sure, you can't just let me just see what the answer is on Anki. Let me just move forward. Let me just move to the next page in the chapter. No, you have to pick an answer, and when you get it wrong, there's that X on there. There's that saying that you got it wrong, and it's going to be on your freaking record on UWorld forever. Okay. And by the way, of course, the gold standard is known. I mean, if you don't know this, UWorld and AMBOSS. After you do like 1 or 2 other practice question banks that you're just doing just to warm up, just to get your feet wet, you should finish UWorld for sure. And then AMBOSS, I did everything except the 5 hammers. So the other benefit of doing these practice tests, there's no false sense of security. Okay. There is no, I think I got it. There is no, I remembered this cue. You're either getting the question right or you're getting it wrong. You're either getting a bunch of questions on the same topic right or you're getting them wrong. Okay. The other thing is, which kind of goes back to this no false sense of security, there's easy metrics. You just buy the Q bank, the metrics are there. That's it. You don't have to look through and adjust and look at all your whatever cards I just hate Anki, so I'm blasting Anki, but you don't have to go through review your notes. Like taking notes, this is not the ice age anymore, okay? I mean, we live in the 21st century, like taking notes is like archaic. Such a useless, you think it's useful because it's all you know. You've never done 200 questions a day for 3 weeks and actually seen your brain evolve and learn. And then the next block be like seamless. So just stop taking notes. So this high volume, high practice, random, timed exposes your deficits. Yeah, if you're doing a question bank and you're not doing it timed and you're doing it at your own leisure and every now and then you're guessing the question right, you might think like, oh, I know something. But when it's timed and there's pressure and you have to answer 40 questions in 1 hour, you either know it or you don't. You can either work through it quickly or you don't. Okay? The other thing is you don't have to do any organizational work on your part. You don't have to set up a study schedule or whatever. Because all you have to you go on UWorld, you go on USMLE RX, you just do the questions random. That's it. Click and go. It's just so easy. It's so seamless. You're wasting time making a study schedule. Like, come on, dude. You need to go live your life, all right? Don't waste time following these people on YouTube who are like, here's my step 1 study schedule. Like, follow this. Like, this organ system, cardiology on Tuesdays, nephrology on Wednesdays. Like, the test is not going to test you. It's not going to start with nephrology for the first block and then cardiology for the second block. Everything has to be random. Okay, you're only doing these questions not random because you want to play to your strengths and you want to feel good about yourself. You want to get questions right. Okay, but if you want to perform on test day and you want to actually get questions right on test day, you have to choke and make mistakes during your practice and really make a bunch of mistakes during your practice. So that's why it has to be random. It has to be, you have to not pick topics that you're strong at or whatever. And you can't even work on your weaknesses based on your own schedule. You have to randomly work on your weaknesses because a test is not going to test your weaknesses just one block. It's going to randomly test them. Okay, so the seamless thing, the Q bank, is just buy and go. I mean, you pay for it, boom, you're studying. You can do it from anywhere. Of course, this applies to Anki too, but if you're like one of these people who's reading books and taking notes, you have to take your lug or your notes around, that's kind of. So here's like the best part of doing active studying with questions. It creates a scaffolding of knowledge in your brain, in your mind. Okay, a real scaffolding, and it helps you to connect and see the connections between ideas, between concepts, and apply them. Apply them in a stressful environment. Apply them to new information, to clinical correlates, to cases, to study designs, basic science projects or research or whatever that's in the questions, Whereas if you're just memorizing a formula, or if you're memorizing a fact, or if you're memorizing a pathway, that's all you're doing is memorizing it. Whereas when you're doing questions, you're learning the pathway, not memorizing it. You're learning it and figuring out this leads to this because of this. And this caused this because of that thing 2 steps back. Whereas when you're just doing Anki, and the reason I say this is because I know people in my med school and I know close friends, and we shared screenshots of scores. And yeah, they finished Anki, Zonki, Anking, whatever. Okay. And unfortunately, they got like 240s on step 1. And I didn't do any of this Anki stuff. And, I didn't get a 272, but I got a 262, and I didn't waste time studying extra. That's like really the biggest thing is I just did my questions, and that's it. I didn't memorize any formulas. I didn't review anything before the test. I didn't go through the high yield stuff. Here's another thing about the question bank. You've just paid money for some expert to figure out what's high yield for you. And the only way for you to really know what's high yield is to do the questions and be familiar with the question banks and what comes up often, okay? And now you know what's high yield. Anki doesn't know what's high yield. And the times that you miss something on Anki and it's spaced repetition, but it's based on you, that spaced repetition. So really, it's not high yield. It's what you didn't miss or what you missed often that's going to come up or whatever to try to make you memorize it. But the question bank, you're getting the high yield stuff based on the question. I mean, it's literally, you've already paid an expert to put this question bank, this curriculum for you together. Just take advantage of it. It's so wild to me. So it mimics a real exam because you're doing these questions timed. You're doing them in the format of the exam. And of course, you should never be using anything that's not on the exam. Whatever. Writing, who's got time to write? On step 1, I didn't write a single thing. I didn't use my 15 minutes or whatever of the intro to write down a bunch of formulas. No. When I get a question, I don't sit there, even if there's some math involved, I don't sit there and write and do the math. I'm just too lazy to write. Okay. If you're doing questions and you're doing them fast and you're doing them efficiently, you've learned to think through all the stuff that you need to do, think of it in your mind, and click the right answer and move on. The last thing about doing active questions, it teaches you to navigate the unknown. And the test on real test day, there will be unknowns, things that you've never seen before, or that you've only learned just a tiny bit about. And guess what? Most people are going to get them wrong. And the only reason you're going to get them right is because you're used to being uncertain. You're used to seeing something that's unfamiliar, that you can't recall an Anki card. You can't recall that you read the answer in a textbook. And you have to use your foundational knowledge, your scaffold of knowledge that you've learned from getting questions wrong, from learning new concepts by getting them wrong. You have to now use that and apply that knowledge and say, well, okay, I know a little bit about this physiology. Here's a new pathology that they've introduced. And here are these answer choices. And now I'm going to pick the best possible answer. And honestly, I mean, it's worked for me. Okay. The one last thing to tell you, what was it? The more you do questions, the more you learn how questions are written. The more you learn how the test, the behind the scenes stuff about the test. And eventually you're going to start recognizing a question, the question stem, and saying, and reading through all this whole long thing, and instantly you know exactly what they're looking for, exactly what the big picture is, okay? The satellite view of like what is actually going on. What are they asking you? They just presented all this stuff. There was like one or two key things, and that's basically, that's the gold. And then you're going to go through the answer choices, and you're going to recognize the whatever they're called, like the false answer choices. The ones that are like in on purpose trying to mislead you. Yeah, that bait, you're not going to take it. You're going to know, oh, they're exactly talking about that because it's so similar, but it's different in this way. And you're going to be able to hone in on the right answer quickly. That's my advice. You can do whatever you want. I obviously choked on step 2, and I'll talk about that in another video of why I choked on test day. But the way to prepare is the same. And this stuff, it's, I'm not some inventor, okay? Dan the Man has his video up. You should watch it. Santiago AQ has videos up. Malki Assad have videos up about how they use UWorld. At the end of the day, I think the Dan the Man MD video is the only one you need to actually watch because it just talks about the high volume stuff. And that's what's important. These other guys, they present like the theory behind learning, and it's like interesting. It has entertainment value. But at the end of the day, high volume, high quality practice, sincere, high volume, high quality practice, without lying to yourself and saying that you're actually testing when you're doing it, not timed, when you're doing it, whatever, two questions a day, none of that stuff is what's going to get you high scores on any standardized exam. MCAT step 1, step 2, step 3, whatever, or the core exam, app site, whatever.